We're just waiting a few more minutes for all participants to join. Thank you, and then we'll start. So it's 3 minutes past 2. So let's begin as people join. So a big welcome to everybody today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. And welcome to today's EPI-WIN webinar. I'm Supriya Besbara. I'm the team lead for the WHO Information Network for Epidemics, or EPI-WIN as we know it, and also for Science Translation in Public Health Emergencies. And our topic today, it's what's in a MIM. That's something that we're all familiar with in our increasingly digitally connected world. We have all seen, and I'm sure we've all shared, forwarded memes, emojis in the past 2 years. As you know, right now we have another unusual outbreak, the monkeypox outbreak currently, and with it we find another deluge of memes. But what do these memes and visual language tell us about society? Can we use those to predict and fight misinformation narratives? And if so, how? Today, we have 5 eminent experts to help us understand the importance of memes and visual language in public health emergencies, especially in fighting health information. It's my pleasure to introduce the panelists. We have a recorded version from Dr. Jamie Cohen. Unfortunately, he could not be here, but he did send us a recorded version. Dr. Jamie Cohen holds a PhD in Cultural and Media Studies, specializing in memes and digital culture. He's currently an assistant professor at Queen's University at City University of New York, teaching social media and digital activism. He also leads a team of students in immersive digital production design projects in Rome, Italy, and is a head of education at Digital Void, an internet literacies project that holds workshops, salons, podcasts, and events that bridge the gap between digital life and cultural understanding. He's a fellow of the Salzburg Academy on Media and Global Change, and publishes work on social media, internet safety, and digital culture. Then we have Professor Claire Wardle. She's well known in this field, needs no introduction. She's professor of the practice and is co-founder and director of the Information Futures Lab. She's considered a leader in the field of misinformation verification and user-generated content, co-authoring the foundational report, Information Disorder, an interdisciplinary framework for research and policy for the Council of Europe. In 2015, Claire co-founded the nonprofit First Draft, a pioneer in innovation, research, and practice in the field of information. Over the past decade, she has developed an organization-wide training program for the BBC on eyewitness media, verification, and misinformation, led social media policy at UNHCR, been a fellow at the Shorenstein Center for Media, Politics, and Public Policy at Harvard's Kennedy School, and been the research director at the Toe Center for Digital Journalism at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. She holds a PhD in communication from the University of Pennsylvania. So welcome, Claire. We're very happy to have you here. With Claire, we also have Farida Viz, who's Professor of Digital Media at the Manchester School of Art. She's the head of the Manchester School of Art Research Centre and the founding director of the Visual Social Media Lab, bringing together researchers from academia and industry researching social media images. The VSML has been supported with funding from national and international funders, high profile and award-winning research, including reading the riots on Twitter with the Guardian newspaper to understand the spread of rumors on Twitter in the aftermath of the 2011 UK riots, and a rapid response report on the viral images of Alan Kurdi, whose images triggered an international response at the height of the 2015 refugee crisis in Europe. Recent work on visual misinformation and disinformation has focused on media literacy strategies, specifically with partners in Canada and the UK. Resources aimed at combating visual mis and disinformation developed with the Canadian educational not-for-profit Civics were shared with over 1 million young Canadians in the run-up to the 2019 federal elections and were adapted for the 2019 local elections in Colombia. In the UK, a guide focused on helping teachers combat the rapid spread of COVID mis and disinformation was developed with the school trust in Manchester at the start of the pandemic and shared with all schools in the Greater Manchester area. She serves on the several boards as an advisor. So welcome, Farida. Nice to have you. Sergio Cecchini has been working in Africa on misinformation with WHO Afro. Sergio works for WHO as Infodemic Manager. He coordinates the Africa Infodemic Response Alliance and Viral Facts Africa, two WHO co-hosted platforms to counter the spread of online health misinformation in the African region. Mr. Cecchini is an experienced humanitarian operational and executive manager, steeped in crisis management, policy advocacy, strategic communication, and fundraising knowledge, deployed in the most acute humanitarian crisis of the past 2 decades. He is expanding his theoretical knowledge in international security and strategic studies, global energy, climate policy, and international negotiations with an MA in Global Security and Strategy at the University of London. He has a background in communication science and regularly provides lectures in the social research department of the University of Rome. And finally, from Indonesia, so we've spanned across the world, Hari Sufehmi actually needs no introduction in Asia, and particularly in Indonesia. He's been quite a pioneer. He founded MAFINDO in 2016, an anti-hoax organization based in Indonesia. Since then, MAFINDO has blossomed into multiple chapters in 21 cities, 10,000 plus local volunteers, and 95,000 plus online volunteers managed by offices in 3 cities. He serves as Presidium of MAFINDO, focusing on developing anti-hoax technology to help people combat hoaxes, such as chatbot, smartphone apps, open databases, etc. He's also a seasoned IT consultant with 20 plus years of experience. He has a master's degree in computing from Birmingham City University and currently lives in Jakarta with his wife and 5 children. Welcome, Hari. I've had the privilege of working with Hari earlier as well when I was in the Southeast Asia regional office of WHO. So it's great to see him back here again. And with that, I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us so far. Before we start though, a few housekeeping announcements. Firstly, this session is being recorded. There's also interpretation in French, so please go to the interpretation button if you'd like that. It's being live streamed on the EPI-WIN YouTube channel. And finally, for your questions, please use the Q&A section. Please avoid putting it on the chat box because we might miss your questions. The way we'll structure it is we'll first have the panelists speak and then answer questions from the audience. So once again, thank you. And we will begin to set the scene. It's great. We have people from all over the world, from Guyana to the Philippines, I'm so happy to see that, and welcome to everyone. We'll set the scene with a video by Jamie Cohen. He could not be here in person, but he sent a video. I will just share my screen. Okay. Share screen. There you go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Supriya, I think we've lost the video. We can see a Windows folder.
Oh dear. Let me try again. So my apologies for this. Jun Fang, if she's online, do you think you could share it? I seem to have a problem with the video. My apologies, I seem to be having a problem with the sharing of the video.
Supriya, perhaps we start and we can work out the video to play a bit later.
That's a good idea. So we will then go on straight to the first question by the panelist, which is to Dr. Wardle and to Dr. Biss. The first question is, can you, we've seen so many memes in COVID-19 and now monkeypox. Can you elaborate a bit more on what they tell us? What insights can we derive about people's concerns, about the fears, concerns, also about stigmatization and misinformation narratives from these online communication, particularly related to COVID-19 and monkeypox? Claire, if you would like to go first.
Yes, so firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to do anything with the WHO, because when I see the chat box and I see people from LA to the Philippines, and I think it's 5 a.m. in LA and somebody got up to listen to this, it's amazing. And it moves me every time. So thank you for everybody's enthusiasm. And thank you for everybody's enthusiasm about visuals and memes, because people often don't take them seriously. And it's just a meme on Instagram. What harm can it do? But actually, as somebody who studies communication, you have to do much more with your brain to make sense of a meme. A meme is a nod and a wink to culture. If I'm an alien from Mars and I see a meme, it's very hard to understand it. I have to understand what it's referring to. So I actually have to do more work. So if I'm reading a 69-page PDF, it's got footnotes, it's got definitions, it's got lots and lots of explanations, so everybody's clear. A meme, I was looking at one this morning about, it uses Austin Powers, the movie, and it's an image of Austin Powers saying, fear of COVID is receding, and then an image of the woman, I can't remember her name, the other scary woman in Austin Powers saying, release the monkeypox. Now, there's no footnotes there. You have to have watched the movie, understand those two people, understand 2 years of COVID, understand conspiracy theories, which is this idea that people are in control and unleashing. There's a whole host of things in one meme, which you on Instagram don't have to click on a link to go through to it. It's there full screen on your phone. So memes and visuals are incredibly important in helping people understand, because you have to do that extra work. So your brain is being forced to think, you're more likely to remember, you're more likely to share because you're more likely to have an emotional reaction to a meme, even if it just makes you laugh, it's made you feel something. So even if you're sharing like, ha ha ha, I'd forgotten how funny Austin Powers is, but you're fundamentally sharing something about monkeypox. So there's all these different factors going on with memes, which is what makes them so interesting. And Farida has studied memes and we'll talk more about them. But I just want to say it is fundamentally important that we understand their role. They are one of the most powerful vehicles of disinformation, but they often get ignored because people don't take them seriously. Or secondly, we don't have the computational power to make sense of memes. So platforms increasingly rely on artificial intelligence for content moderation, but an AI machine can't make sense of that Austin Powers meme. So those two things are really important for why we think about them. And the second thing I'd say is, and I hope on this webinar we talk about it, there's memes, which is either disinformation agents or people unwittingly sharing something because they think it's funny. But I also want to think about visuals that get used, particularly by the news media, to shape a story like monkeypox. So there was a great piece recently by Quartz with the headline, "Stop using images of Black people to illustrate monkeypox stories." And in fact, this morning when I did a search, newsrooms have got better in the last 2 weeks. But yet again, in 2022, end of May, all of a sudden from the AP to the BBC, they were like, monkeypox equals Africa equals images of Black people from 30 years ago. Let's just use them. No. So I think there's two, when we think about visuals, I want us to think about traditional news media and their use of visuals, as well as disinformation agents thinking about memes and visuals, because they're slightly different, yet they're all helping frame an issue and working at the narrative level. The way that we frame an issue is how we make sense of an issue. And it's easy to focus on individual memes. We just talked about Austin Powers, but collectively, they are shaping a bigger way that we think about this, which right now is monkeypox equals an African problem, or monkeypox equals a problem that's not me. Or the last thing I'll say is we can talk about monkeypox related misinformation. It's almost exactly the same as COVID misinformation. It was leaked from a lab, you know, they're going to be extra lockdowns, but with the added additional homophobic layer, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, and racial layer. So same conspiracies, but just with added horrible stigma. Good morning. There's some of the things I would like to talk about.
Thank you so much. Interesting how it's getting repeated again in the monkeypox outbreak. Farida, would you like to elaborate further on that? You've been working on this for a while as well.
Yes, absolutely. And again, echoing Claire's comments, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for hosting this. It's incredibly important to focus on visuals. And I will just share my screen. To give you a little bit more context. So as Claire highlighted, one of the things that we have found in our research time and time again, so we research social media images, and specifically in recent years, visual mis and disinformation, is that images tend to get overlooked. So whilst everybody is aware of images, everybody has, you know, got examples to hand of memes, of photographs they have seen in the news, on social media, they tend to not get researched. But as Claire has already highlighted, they are a very, very serious and important vehicle for mis and disinformation. People have, you know, emotional responses to them, they get shared a lot. And they can contain a lot of information in a single image, which then can be very difficult to unpack. So the work that we have been doing is helping different stakeholders unpack that information. So both journalists and educators, we've worked with First Draft, we've worked with Claire on the framework that you're looking at now, the 20 questions framework, which allows, in this instance, journalists to unpack these images, but essentially anybody who's interested in trying to understand what do these images mean beyond whether or not they're true or false. I think we also have to really move beyond the, is this image true or false? Because when you talk about memes, the question of truth doesn't really come into it. It's much more about the meaning, the cultural resonance, the impacts, how do these move? Who do these speak to? And this is why we've created this framework, and we've written this up in greater detail in the updated verification handbook. And I will pop the links in the chat in a minute. And one of the things that we have done there is really look at the different agents that spread misleading images, including politicians. So there's an example there of a British politician, Nigel Farage, who used an image of the refugee crisis in a very misleading way to just basically whip up, right-wing populism in the UK, which was very, very effective. We've further updated this framework. Let me just go to the next slide, in an education context. So this is where we've done work with Canadian not-for-profit organization Civics in relation to their student vote program, where they teach young Canadians about voting and about the electoral process. And what we've done here is we simplified the 20 questions to distill it to kind of 4 areas with a handful of questions in each area for elementary school children, but also high school children, to really try to unpack and unpick both visual mis and disinformation, but images in general. So our underpinning kind of thesis is that in order to be able to tackle visual mis and disinformation, people need to be able to read images. Right? You need to understand how images work, what they do, and the kinds of questions that you can ask of them, where they come from. So this work has been developed further with Civics and partners in Canada, has been funded by the Canadian government, because one of the things that we find with these kinds of interventions is that they tend to not get evaluated. So in terms of insight in understanding this phenomenon, it's not just about raising awareness and trying to kind of intervene and trying to educate people about how to read images critically and raise awareness about specific images and in specific contexts, but it's also to try and understand how do these interventions actually have an impact or not. And what we found in our survey and focus groups is that they'd had a very significant impact, so that both students and teachers really saw an increase in the students' ability to understand and identify mis and disinformation, but also the role that images play, full stop, on social media. And what we didn't expect is that the teachers would continue to use it beyond 2019. So we had assumed that the teachers just used it as a one-off lesson, but what they ended up doing in the work that we've done over the last kind of 2-3 years is we found that they have been going back to this lesson every single year. It's the foundational lesson that they use as the start of their media literacy work. And students constantly ask to use the framework. They constantly want to discuss images. So when there are, memes of monkeypox or images of COVID-19, they return to the framework to start to unpack these. And we've developed a specific framework based on intervention mapping to measure and gauge the impact of these kinds of interventions. And I'm happy to say a little bit more about that. But in the interest of time, I just want to say a little bit about the work that we've done around COVID in the UK, in Manchester, where we've developed a guide for teachers to help them and students stop, think before they share COVID mis and disinformation. Which was absolutely rife at the start of the pandemic, and that hasn't stopped. And what it does is it gives people an understanding of what mis and disinformation is, the kinds of tools that they can use, they can educate themselves on in order to, be better equipped when they engage with this material online. For example, how to do reverse image search. But also, and this is at the start of the pandemic, we looked at some very dominant examples in the UK context of visual mis and disinformation that was being shared. And one of the things that we really kind of took from that as an insight was the importance of really understanding sector-specific examples. So the very general examples are great, and we can discuss that as well. But what we really focused on in this project is what are the sector-specific examples that pertain in this case to the education sector, and also how can hyper-local mis and disinformation really be understood in the context of, for example, a group of schools or even a single school, and also trying to understand who can be key spreaders of this. And what we found with this work is really that a huge problem was parents spreading things, and the schools then really struggling to deal with the kind of onslaught of information coming from parents, concerns about school closures and so on, but also the on-the-ground impacts. And I hope that we talk about this more, of what does this visual mis and disinformation do to those populations who are being targeted specifically by this content. And as Claire has already highlighted, a lot, and this is also comes through in our work, a lot of this is racist and Islamophobic. And what we were finding when we were working with teachers through the teachers with the children, is that this was having an impact on, for example, Chinese pupils very strongly, and teachers were having to find mechanisms to deal with infighting in class because of COVID racism, essentially coming from mis and disinformation repeated in the household by parents, schools, finding it very difficult to deal with. And so one of the things that we're very interested in is what are the lived embodied experiences of mis and disinformation, in this case, on primary school children. So I'll leave it there, and I hope we can unpack some of this a little bit further. And I will share the links that I've just shared as well.
Thank you very much, Farida, for that very interesting presentation, and especially on how you look at the impact it has. Let me try once again sharing Jamie Cohen's video. Can you see this? Can you see the video now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Jamie's recorded a video to explain about memes and visual. So before we go to the next set of panelists, let's just listen to what he has to say.
Hi, Supriya, we've lost it again. Maybe I'll give it a go if you stop sharing.
Okay. So we seem to be a bit jinxed on this video. Let's go on to the next. Is it working now?
And I am a media and cultural studies PhD with a specific focus on culture, meaning I study how people communicate graphically on the internet and what that means to civic life. Today, I'd like to speak about how memes interact with public health, specifically COVID-19 and monkeypox. I've been studying memes since 2015, and I studied them academically in many ways in which evolution of communication is moved into graphical spaces. This includes emojis, viral videos, memes, any type of media that happens to be shared widely. Memes typically are things that people like to interact with, share, remix, evolve, and feel like they have a part within the understanding of how these things work. This is very much a very important aspect of how semiotics, which is the study of signs and symbols, has really changed how we use things, how we understand communication in the age of the internet. My specific focus, and what I've done for the last several years, is focus on how right-wing extremism, or far-right extremism, interacts with memes and internet media, and how it interacts with civic life. In essence, what it means to have kinetic energy, how it causes people to go out and cause civic action. Today, I'd like to talk about how we derive meaning from the COVID-19 and monkeypox memes since 2020. First, I'd like to tell you that memes are reductionist media, meaning that they take large concepts and they turn them into something very small and shareable. And the reason behind this is because our social media speeds up our understanding of information in general. And memes allow us to access information that might be complex in a very simple way. However, what that causes the inability to detect nuance or decreases our critical thinking. What I also see memes as is a cultural barometer. What I mean by a cultural barometer is that memes in volume tell us a lot about how people are feeling in that current moment. You get a good sense from seeing a lot of memes, how people are interpreting big events or things that are going on around them. And that's really important for people who study graphical communication because it tells us a sense of what people are feeling, what anxieties they may be coming across, and kind of tells us how to anticipate what is coming next within the internet cultural spaces. Back in 2020, I started studying COVID-19 memes. In January of 2020, I noticed that Italian memes, I study memes all over the world, but Italian memes had started producing information about COVID-19 in Italy, where the pandemic had affected many people. Meme makers had started creating memes to express their anxieties, which included school shutdowns, mandates about masks, and supermarkets running out of groceries. These memes started becoming more prevalent to show how people were feeling as an anxiety. This is really important because it tells us how people are interacting with the pandemic at large. Soon after, just weeks later, the United States started creating their own types of memes, and at first mimicked many of the Italian memes in their themes. Same exact situations. Schools were shutting down, mask mandates were going up, and grocery stores had become short on supplies. However, after the next several weeks, many of the memes started showing the more serious aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic. People started taking it much more seriously, and the memes expressed this as well. People understood the serious nature of this pandemic, and there was a sort of a sense of this we are all in this together mentality. Memes expressed how people felt, and it gave us a sense of where we were going with this. And over the course of the next several months, pandemic memes became both absurd and very serious. In the recent past, monkeypox memes have appeared. However, they differ greatly from COVID-19 memes. Where COVID-19 memes gave a very sense that we were all in this together, we all knew what was going on, monkeypox memes were made by very, very few influencers. What a term we use in meme studies is astroturfing, meaning that they were amplified by very few and trying to be spread out. In other words, they weren't made organically. They weren't made from meme creators, but rather very few influencer type people trying to spread their agenda. We notice these types of things because I've been studying how politics is engaged with this as well, and this happens very often when we use mimetic spaces. Memes are a way of spreading ideas very rapidly. When it came to monkeypox memes, the intent of many of the memes were to spread misinformation or at least concretize conspiracy theorist beliefs. Many people who had vaccine questioning views happened to notice that this was a way of agreeing, making memes that agreed with their views that they had already built. Memes often act as a confirmation bias, meaning that people get to see what they already want to believe, and memes reinforce that idea. So why does this matter? Well, memes represent something that is an evolution of visual and graphical communication. They are a lot of information packed into a very small shareable media. And that type of shareable media contains a lot of nuance that we don't really recognize. Memes make reference to other references. They are layered aspects of graphical communication. They aren't just a picture that says 1,000 words, but rather an image that talks about things that are all across the internet and physical spaces. Text itself is full of context. We understand where things come from. We get to see how things make sense. Reports, surveys, and so forth are really important and probably the most important information we could possibly get. However, due to the attention economy and social media, people are more likely to look at images and share them. And in that sharing economy, memes act as cultural surplus. They are above and beyond everything we do. That means as much as we're full of information, memes come out to fulfill the act of everything else. Above that, memes are sticky. It means that they are something that people remember more than other things. Memes are designed that way. Just as you can't unsee something or unhear something, much like an earworm or a favorite song or an image that you can't get out of your head, memes act that way, so they become more memorable. And this way, misinformation actually has a leverage by using memes. And in conclusion, I think that we need to focus on meme literacies. Meme literacies are taking memes and applying them to media literacy, understanding the author's intent, where the source of the information comes from, and how we may use this and what responsibility we have when sharing a meme. Memes contain nuance. They also may contain dog whistle information. That means some memes may speak to in-groups and exclude others, but we may not understand that we're sharing bad information from bad actors. Those few influencers that share information, like those astroturfing influencers of monkeypox memes, are hoping that people unaware of the nuance embedded in those memes may share them without knowing that they're sharing bad information. When it comes to public health, this becomes even more important. People need to be aware of public health collectively. Collective knowledge is really important of keeping each other safe and sharing information that may keep us healthier. When we have this type of responsibility, we have to understand that memes must be read as media themselves. And memes are something that's much more in depth than we come to expect, because we are traditionally thought of them as silly little shareable images that make us laugh. But today I argue that they are really one of the most important ways in which media travel across the internet. And the more and more we use the internet as our main means of communication, memes may become a dominant feature in how we do that. So going forward, it's important to focus on how that cultural barometer that I mentioned before really does display how people are interacting with big themes as they reduce them into something small, shareable, and evolvable, remixable, and something that ends up in your feeds. To the unaware user, it might seem innocuous and easy to share, but to those aware, you might see that the information may be bad, and you should stop the share at that point. In order to combat misinformation, we must understand how to read memes. This way, we could see which ones to share, to participate with, and which ones not to. It is a matter of public health. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed listening to that short clip from Jamie Cohen. And thank you, Catherine, for sharing that. Apologies for the glitches in sharing the video. Well, what can I say? We've learned from the video as well as from our two previous panelists, Claire, Wardle, and Farida, the impact and the power of these small little videos that may make us laugh, but actually are so powerful. And as Jamie said, it's a matter of public health. So now we go on to our next two panelists who've been working actually to fight misinformation in Africa and in Indonesia. So on the ground, as I'd like to ask Dr. Sufehmi and Mr. Cecchini. As a subject analysis, to understand online narratives or health misinformation, what differentiates from your experience on the ground? What differentiates visual data from text data as a form of intervention, a medium to address people's concerns, questions, or circulating misinformation? What value does a visual communication add to text-based communication, which text-based communication cannot do? Harry, would you like to go first on that? You've been working with, leading actually in Indonesia on fighting misinformation in various ways. And then we go over to Sergio. We can't hear you, or at least, are you on?
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, thank you, everyone. We have been tackling visual communication from several years ago. We have had quite some experience here in Indonesia, but it can be summed up in an experience with a friend of my children. Basically, one time she saw my daughter reading a comic book, and she said to my daughter that, "Oh, you're reading a book," and my daughter said that, "No, it's a comic book." She said, "It's a book anyway." So basically, these young people, the digital natives, they've been using mostly visual communication. So that was quite an eye opener, and we saw same thing in the same demographics basically everywhere. So we've been putting a lot of our focus as well on visual communication since then. You can see when they are browsing the internet, they are moving very quickly and just looking at the visual contents very, very quickly. Instagram, for example, Twitter, Facebook groups. And in Indonesia, we have onechat.com, basically the Indonesian version of 9gag.com. And indeed, some people are using meme for hoaxes, like claim that putting eucalyptus oil will ward off viruses, and claims that vaccines are made from mental patients' blood, claim that everything is a money-making conspiracy, and stuff like that. But on the other side, people are fighting hoaxes with meme as well. Like they're using this cat meme to show the right way to stay safe during pandemic, to criticize a public figure who claimed that eucalyptus oil necklace will ward off viruses, so they're fighting back, and to spread the right information, stay at home, or I'll put you in here, to ask people to do the right thing during lockdown, for example, just stay at home, and even to promote vaccine. Before vaccinated and after getting vaccinated, actually this is a hoax. The way you will be changed like this after vaccinated, but basically they're using it for positive things. So we are very thankful in Indonesia. We can see that a lot of people are using meme to fight the hoaxes and spread the good information. And Indonesia tend to have a very high vaccine acceptance rate. And we can do our part as well in this meme ecosystem. We can keep continuing advocating for freedom of expression, and we can provide fact-check materials to be used by these meme authors. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harry. And those were some interesting memes, and very interesting how you fought memes with memes. Sergio, so what was the situation like in, how did you fight misinformation in Africa through IRA, which is the Africa Infodemic Response Alliance?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Supriya, and thank you very much to all the panelists that spoke before me, because injected very interesting elements of reflection and knowledge about how meme works, and what we can consider something similar to something that for what we see kind of communication that has its strength in being perceived as the best way to counter mainstream communication that is provided by traditional media or by agencies or institutions like Ministry of Health and others. Here, I just give you an example on an evolution of a meme that started in some countries with the, what you see in the lives, very basic, even graphic things, with some very clear false information, and then how the layout has been improved to look like an official WHO communication, and now this meme was spread in different countries. So we see that to spread this information, it's very easy. So far to counter all the different false claims would have been impossible through a single meme. And sometimes what you have to realize, one of the challenges in responding to this information spread through meme, that the simplification of the message may remain a barrier for complex organization or for institution like Ministry of Health. Here I'm giving two examples about recent rumors on the pandemic treaty in Namibia, and we can see that unfortunately meme are the best way to spread the misinformation on closed channels, those channels like WhatsApp or Telegram that are harder to monitor, and where it's harder to detect the spread and the magnitude of this information spread throughout meme. This is another example about meme spreading rumors on the tetanus vaccine program in Equatorial Guinea, and we see that most of them unfortunately goes into the Telegram and WhatsApp channels. On the monkeypox, well, we have worked quite hard to try to work with fact-checking organization to also debunk some of the misinformation circulating throughout MIME. And to give you an example, it's very it's very hard for sometimes very effective and highly disseminated meme, which was the Russian allegation against WHO, or the Russian appeal towards WHO to conduct an independent investigation about the false claim that monkeypox was spread throughout Nigerian laboratories and US intervention. You see a very simple graphic element, the picture of a Russian general, a title, how we should have reacted to this to avoid to also bring forward this kind of rumors. So from our experience, text and visual, there is no, for me, a single answer. It depends on which is the audience we want to reach, which is the channel that we want to use. Of course, we have to adapt our layout, our style to the people we want to reach. And sometimes the question that we have, are we ready to use the same language, the same style, the same satirical or provocative visual graphic languages that those who produce meme use? They don't have nothing to lose. We have a lot to lose. Will we be ready to use Austin Powers to counter a meme using Austin Powers? I think that has been said before, there's a lot of semantic, there's a lot of interpretation, and knowing the validation procedures, how hard would be to validate a meme with all the layer of interpretation and cultural bias that we will have, and 5 people around the table would have different interpretation of the single meme. So this is for us the challenge, how you can ensure that you get consensus with a meme if you want to respond with a meme to another meme. Over.
Thanks very much, Sergio, and thanks for those examples as well to both Harry and Sergio from the ground, from what you're doing. A very quick question for you know, what Sergio said is that you can't, do always fight memes with memes. How do you? I open this to all the panelists. What is the importance in infodemic management, in understanding and responding to infodemics? What is the importance of visual communication? And what do you do? I mean, how do you fight misinformation? What is it that you need to do at the personal level, and also perhaps at the government level or at the authority level? How do you detect misinformation? How do you prevent misinformation? What is it that you need to do, and which is practical and feasible? Who would like to go first? I think Harry's, Claire? No.
Well, I mean, that was a big question, but I'll start with the first bit of the question, which was about how responding with memes. And this is partly because I'm obsessed with definitions, but I think we have to be careful when we're talking about memes, although I do love meme. I love the way that you say it, Sergio. It's very, so memes or memes, because I think, are we all talking about the same thing? I do think we should think about visual communication, because I think one of the most effective parts of the pandemic response was the flatten the curve diagram. In one diagram, we captured the need for people to stay at home and helped people understand exponential growth in one effective diagram. And if I had a magic wand, I would put designers and artists into every public health authority, building, etc. Because I think if we think, do we fight memes with memes? To Sergio's point, do we suddenly have to become cute with Austin Powers jokes? And I put something into chat about the FDA in the US tried to use humor slightly around ivermectin, and it was a huge backlash. So we have to be very, very careful when we're using humor. But I do think using diagrams, and even Sergio just showed infographics. How do we take stats and other things, but design it in a way that's shareable and is easy to understand, as opposed to lots of footnotes and lots of text? So I think it's less about focusing on memes and more thinking about visuals, and they can come in very many forms, but good diagrams and good infographics can be just as good. And I think, because if we go the wacky route, we're in trouble, I think, because it's very easy to get it wrong. Oh, I love that, granny in French. I did not know that.
Thanks, Claire. Farida.
Yes, I mean, I think unsurprisingly, part of my response is really about literacy, and I think we need to take much more seriously the need for visual literacy. So in the kind of UK context, the online harms bill is currently going through Parliament, and in the iteration that we're looking at currently, media literacy has kind of been stripped out of it, or it's been very, very much minimized. And I think we need to look at what is the full suite of tools that we need in a solution, and who are they for, and who needs to be kind of sharing these. And I think governments have a significant responsibility in terms of media literacy efforts in this space, but they also need to be long-term. And there also needs to be, I think, research funding that allows for interventions to be evaluated. So one of the things that I think is very challenging in this space at the moment is that there is
Farida? I think we seem to be having some tech difficulty with her as well. Then over to Harry while Farida gets back to us. Harry, we can't hear you either. Are you on mute?
To be very careful about using memes because it can backfire. So MAFINDO itself has been mainly producing infographics, and also other friends in the government, they're producing infographics as well. But if we provide the materials, then people tend to pick it up. So the meme response to hoaxes in Indonesia so far has been organic. We provide the materials, and then people use that to create their own visual content or memes to fight the hoaxes. That's what we are seeing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for that point as well. We do need to be careful, but if you provide the basic tools to fight misinformation with me. Sergio, would you like to add anything further to what the panelists have already
just
said?
to reinforce what Claire was saying before, we don't have to try to copy and paste techniques used by others, which are not the way we would use to build the credibility of the information that we want to use. So I completely agree that we have to understand which are the visual component that makes our messages more effective towards some key audiences, and how we can intercept some of the sentiments that are triggered throughout the memes that we may intercept hardly. So it's not to copy those logic, but try to see how we can ensure that we are able to really engage with some of the audiences which I think that we struggle to interact with. Over.
Thanks, Sergio. Well, it's almost at the end of the session now. It's been really very interesting with a lot of very rich content. Some questions from the audience, which thanks to the panelists, they've answered most of them. We have one question here, which is, what is the impact of mis and disinformation memes on non-school and low education individuals? Maybe Farida and Claire could take that. What strategies do you recommend to fight them?
So certainly, when we look globally at where this spreads, there was some internal Facebook research, and in the US, it was almost all text-based, and the rest of the world, it was all visual. And certainly in countries that have different languages and dialects, or have people have lower levels of literacy, of course visuals are easier. You're also not, people can see them on WhatsApp without having to link out, so they don't have to use up data, particularly in countries that have free access to WhatsApp. So they are a bigger problem, which again shows us how do we respond, as Harry has shown us, by using similar visual responses. I think I would also argue, and I'm sure Sergio agrees, in many countries with lower levels of literacy, you have audio messages that are problematic. So in many countries, we did some work around the Nigerian election a couple of years ago, and also in Brazil, audio messages on WhatsApp were as widely shared as visual images. So I haven't yet been on a webinar that talks about the power of audio misinformation, but it is also a real problem, particularly in cultures that are audio driven and story driven. What that means to have a first person story of their experience of a vaccine or a virus. I mean, it's deeply problematic, and it just does not get discussed enough. And in fact, in the Brazil election a couple of years ago, there was what looked like a recording of Bolsonaro, but it was fake. But it took audio forensic experts 3 days to say this was a fake impersonator recording of Bolsonaro. So that's, I think, another boundary that we have to think about, but particularly in communities that have lower levels of literacy.
Thank you, Claire. That's interesting as well, the impact of audio, especially when in visuals you can see it, but in audio you have to distinguish the voice. That's very interesting. Farida, sorry you got interrupted there, so we moved on a little bit, but please, you were in the midst of talking about your experiences, so please go ahead.
No, please, my apologies. It was my Wi-Fi, so I had to join you on my phone. So I'm not sure how much you heard of that. What I was sort of saying is that what I think is really important in this space is also to evaluate what effects these interventions have. So, in terms of media literacy, I think governments need to take this a lot more seriously and need to invest significantly long-term into large-scale national media literacy projects that incorporate visual. So if you look at a lot of kind of media literacy at the moment, visuals just don't really feature. Given the panel that we're kind of having now, there really needs to be a focus on catching up with what is actually out there in the world, what people are encountering, what kids are encountering, and this is predominantly visual. So the media literacy efforts have to catch up with that. And then on top of that, I think there needs to be sufficient funding available to evaluate interventions. So there seems to be a lot of money for interventions, to roll out new tools, to do all sorts of things, to kind of collect, to track, to educate. But what I think we don't know enough about is what effects these are actually having. Are they doing any good? Are they increasing literacy? If so, how? And we need to do this longitudinally. We need to understand over a much longer period, are people actually increasing their skills? Are they getting inoculated against this kind of stuff? And I think there just isn't enough emphasis on that. So I think in terms of making the communication also more visual to make it more easily understandable, I think there needs to be additional work being done. Do people then understand these, infographics to communicate this? Because I think there are assumptions that images are easy to understand. They, speak 1,000 words and so on and so forth, but they're not easy to understand at all, and they can have devastating consequences, as we've been discussing.
Yes, misinterpreting an image and the devastating consequences of. Thanks, Farida, for the importance of visual literacy, but also for the importance of evaluating the impact of visuals. Very important point. Thank you to everyone. The audience, there have been lots of suggestions and sharing of experiences. So it's great to hear from all of you there. We've come to the end of this session. Thank you very much to all the panelists for making it today on very short notice as well. So really appreciate it. Thanks to all the participants for your active participation in this webinar. Very interesting experiences being shared on the chat here. and some very nice questions. And I hope, this conversation, the webinar ends here, but I hope the conversation continues, and I hope we will be able to use MEMS positively. We will be able to increase literacy, both visual and audio, and as we move on, as we continue to learn from COVID and monkeypox, I hope we'll have a far more positive impact for public health. Thank you once again. And finally, I'd also like to thank my colleague, Atsuyusho Ishizuri. I hope I pronounced it correctly, who's a technical officer here working on infodemic and who has been instrumental in the organization of this webinar and getting all the panelists together and the questions and all of that. So thank you so much, Atsu. Also, thank you to my colleagues, Jiang Fang and Catherine Sheridan, for all their support. And thanks to Jamie as well, who could not be here, but for his recording. And I hope we will continue this discussion even after this webinar. Thank you so much. It will be shared on the YouTube Live. The recording will be shared there, and it will also be shared on our website. And all the presentations will be shared with all the registered participants. So I hope it will be useful for all of you. Thank you so much, and bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.